We're live. What's up, everybody? John here. I'm with Aaron Tweet, and we are going to cover, Aaron's in my YouTube Success Academy. We are going to cover what's happening right now. Aaron brought me this story, what was it, like a week or so ago? And we started talking about it, and we're like, we need to bring this out to the world. So let me screen share what Aaron sent me, and then we're going to walk through it. We'll see what's up to everybody in the chat. All right. So, Aaron, walk me through this.
So, in short, what you see before you is a Wall Street Journal article that's kind of depicting how the current season of this year is causing a really big drought in the Colorado River Basin. And unfortunately, the water levels are super low. And it's kind of reigniting the conversation around how does water get distributed? You know, obviously, we've always needed water, and many people, many farms, many businesses have lived on the land around the Colorado River Basin for a very long time, decades. Some people even over a century. It's been in the family, these farms, and they've had land where they needed water. And now not everybody who has traditionally had access to the water is going to get it. And that's, again, due to the low water levels. Right. And so it's bringing up this conversation about, well, what's the most fair and equitable way to distribute that water? And the Walton family is using their resources to fund charities. They have their own charities, their own advocacy groups to introduce water markets. They say it's something that can be, more equitable and, find a way to distribute water to the places where it's needed. And there are some genuine inequities that aren't necessary in the current sort of water leasing arrangements, but there's a risk, I think, that if we add a financial product to something that we have traditionally thought of as free or low cost, but really as a human right, it's going to create a lot of, I think, perverse incentives, and it could make things like food, crops, taking a shower more expensive than it needs to be.
Right. So essentially with this water supply, they can almost control property values.
Of one things that they could control, yes. That's one of many. I mean, it's controlling the price of property values. It's the price of, water's an input cost for so many things. It's food, it's industrial, other industrial products. And it's just to have a business, and not to mention power, if there's something that, hydroelectric power, whatever the case may be. So these communities, these large metropolises as well that rely on the Colorado River Basin are all going to be subject to rising input costs in some capacity.
Got it. So walk me through this, because you sent me a bunch of links. We're going to walk through this.
Yep.
And now take me to where do you want to go next? Do you want to read what you had here below, or the first ever official shortage Colorado River Basin intensified 40 million gallons, right? Okay, so the Colorado River Basin, right, is quite extensive.
Yeah, let's just look at what we're talking about. What's the geographical span of this? And so you can see that the shaded areas, there's two main basins, but it starts, really the Colorado River starts in northern Colorado, goes down, goes through eastern Utah, through Moab, and then it gets into northern Arizona, the Grand Canyon, and then it goes over to south of Las Vegas, near Las Vegas, it's the Hoover Dam, which is fed by Lake Mead, and then it goes and spills out into the Gulf of California. So point is that river covers a lot of territory. It's fun. It fills reservoirs that drive power. It creates a lot. It's almost like the Nile in a sense. A lot of farms rely on it for their water, and a lot of communities for their municipalities. You turn the faucet on, a lot of people in those shaded areas, it's coming from either directly the Colorado River or tributaries. And why the Walton family is a part of this is they're pushing for water markets. They say the best way to control access in a dwindling supply is to have water markets, basically putting a financial product on top of all that water you see there. And think about it like the way oil trades, right? So, there's oil, it's a finite resource within the ground. And so there's a financial component to it. But water kind of has a financial component now because people do water leases and they do swaps, but there's never been something like at scale that we're talking about today, which is to have almost like commodity type contracts on the water. And then once that happens, it's almost like a stock market. Money can rush in and push the price up. And then that will make the cost of all the water coming from that resource, like the Colorado River Basin, much more expensive for everyone who needs it.
So you mentioned to me also the Walmart family has close connections with Biden. In fact, they're even in the office, right?
Yeah, the crazy thing was, there's two key individuals that were mentioned in that article who have been in, either advocacy groups or nonprofits, part of the Walton family or funded by the Walton family that were advocating for the water market. They're now actually in the Biden administration, which is, interesting trajectory from a career path,
Right.
kind of out in the field doing the work, and which is, necessary, I think, in a lot of cases. But if the impetus is to say we want water markets, and then now they're in positions of power, one of the individuals is in the Bureau of Land Management. And so this is, the part of the government that will make yes or no decisions on could a water market be implemented in a certain area.
Right.
And then another individual is in the Army Corps of Engineers, specifically in the division for water projects, infrastructure projects. So we have more control over policy decision-making control over should a water market be implemented, and then building the infrastructure to execute it.
Right. So this, to me, this looks like they're right on the career path of, making this a real reality. This isn't some far out, theory that could happen. It looks like they're almost right at the breaking point of making this a reality for many people inside of that area.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up, just because it seems like it is, like you said, it's getting to the precipice of reality. And I think we need to be looking out for this to understand the implications, because it could start popping up on ballot measures. You maybe see flyers, whatever the case may be, from the advocacy groups. And, there's a lot of money that is flowing into advocacy groups because they are, in essence, nonprofits. They rely on getting funding from external sources. And sometimes those sources say, we'll give you money, but we want you to help us advance our cause. And, look, water is an important topic. The distribution and control of it is important to make sure that it is distributed fairly. My concern is adding such a financial component to it is going to make it get really out of whack from a price perspective. We all talk about like, hey, the price of gas is so high right now, and then sometimes it crashes, and we're all happy about it. But we're not familiar with that volatility with water. And I don't think we have to be.
Yeah. Through that market, they can create so many other forms of dependence in which these very corporations can capitalize on. So if they wanted to really spike up the price of that water market, then they would obviously know just by pure data of how many more people would step into poverty. And then at that point in time, then they could bend policies around how they can benefit from that poverty. And then it could just be an endless cycle of cash flow for them.
Yeah, for sure. It's tough. And a lot of great things you talk about in your channel, which is, the small business, mom and pops, and in this case, we're talking about small farms and small businesses that rely on this. Like every business needs water at some point, whether it's for your employees or it's some part of your manufacturing process, whatever the case may be. But, will we be stepping into a world where car washes are $500? You know what I mean? Because water is currently sold as we.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Yeah, sure. I know the dog is just as fired up about this as we are, and we think it's really important. So John's dog has a whole water policy opinion as well, I'm sure.
So what were you saying, Aaron?
I was saying, we should take a look at, one of the links in there was that says there's a contract already. Basically, there's a function of the financial markets. There's indexes. They make indexes that say, hey, this is the price based on all these parameters. The stock market, like the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, these are indexes or indices.
Which link? Which link is it? Is it?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so this is for a specific region in Southern California called the Veles Water Index. And so this is on NASDAQ, and, NASDAQ is an exchange that hosts, obviously, companies like Apple, their stock, but they also host, commodities as well. And now this is for certain parts of Southern California. This isn't for the entire U.S., but this is showing that this is already in action. And I think that the Colorado River Basin is so large that if you were to apply this, it's going to cause a lot of issues because it's going to make the price go crazy. So look what's happened. This contract. It's an index, and that in futures contracts can be traded on it, but it's only been around for a couple of years, since 2018, like late 2017. And look at the price increase.
Yeah.
And basically what you're looking at is this is the price of 1 acre of water. It's 1 acre square by 1 foot deep. That's the volume of water that one contract represents. So if you're a farm, you say, well, we want to get, X number of gallons. We want to be able to have access to that. And then you come here and say, well, what's the price if we want to get it from one of the Velis region of water sources? And, if a lot of people start buying, then the price obviously goes up, or if the supply goes down. Now, this is priced once a week. So it's not super, super liquid like the stock market, no pun intended.
Right.
But the thing is, with more volume, more people coming in, more of these water markets being created off of larger and larger water sources, they'll start to move, I think, in a fashion that's going to be much more reminiscent of the stock market.
It's so interesting right now. Even just looking at, without this component becoming a reality, we're looking at food costs already going sky high.
Yeah.
Most food. I did a video talking about I think it was General Mills increasing 20% across the board starting January, and the dollar store is now the $1.25 store. Like, everything is going to be going way up, and when we bring in this additional, potentially devastating water expense, we could have a situation where food could literally just be, we could be living in almost a third world country because not many people are going to be able to actually afford a decent meal.
I know, it's a really good point. I mean, yeah, food is going up due to almost independent reasons. Call it inflation, labor shortage, supply chains, all these things.
Right.
But water isn't a component yet, and that's the issue. And once water becomes a component of a higher input costs, I don't see it really going down, and other things that it will push up, I think, will be really concerning. So
how would you see this? How, in the direction that it's moving in right now, how would you see this potentially playing out? Would you see this almost as a way to where they could pick certain regions and charge much more money for farm or for water to hit these regions? So essentially, like, if they wanted to acquire a block of land, they simply could just continue increasing the water prices to a point where it wouldn't make sense to even harvest on that land, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it is kind of like, as I said in my video, it's kind of like the strategy that Walmart used to grow their own stores. And so by cutting out the middlemen, they don't have to worry about controlling the farm per se. It's by going to the source. Water is obviously the most important thing. And so if you're able to move the price of water because you have money, whether it's you're a wealthy individual or an institution, then you can kind of dictate, the input costs for competitors, all sorts of things like that. And so if they go out of business, if small farms go out of business, if maybe even a medium-sized farm or food producer goes out of business, now all that land is up for sale. And then you can, as a larger, like a ConAgra or something like that, come in, scoop it up. And then, it's kind of like how Amazon has only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger in the last 2 years with e-commerce. And smaller businesses, weren't able to do the same thing. The same potential effect could happen when it comes to food, when it comes to, creating beef and, meat, things like that.
Right. Yeah. If people aren't familiar with the Walmart story, Sam Walton, essentially what he did was he would open up a store almost out in the middle of nowhere, and he would have very little competition, and he would absorb that competition and that market. And then he would jump from every little nothing town to a nothing town to a nothing town until he had real authority. And then at that point, he started moving in. But with doing just this, that's essentially what he would do, is he would be able to take over these little nothing towns in some way, and then be able to control the price of that food and then sell that food. Right now, we're even hearing about a Walmart delivering items, like diapers and a bunch of small household items via drone, if it's in a certain proximity. I wonder if that could happen as well with food and things of that nature coming down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely see that route happening. I mean, Amazon's been trying it, and Walmart's been playing catch up from an e-commerce perspective, but they actually have the retail footprint already in place that Amazon doesn't, agnostic of Whole Foods. So, that's an interesting battle to watch. But that same strategy, I think, is playing out here with the water. The Walton family is seeing a strategy where and look, it could be benevolent, right? But my worry is that you add that financial component, the stock market was created, I think, out of, good intentions. There has to be a way to price things and raise money. But then, human animal spirits take over and things can go crazy. We've seen 2001, 2008, last year. So do we want those price spikes in something that is not like a financial instrument, but a human right and a human necessity?
Right. I mean, because it's very interesting too. When we're looking at just the food components, people have options. They can say, okay, I'm going to reduce my quality of food, or I'm going to do this, and I'm going to. But when there's only one source of water inside of your region, and you have to get that water, you have no other alternatives, and they basically they control everything through that source.
Yeah, and water also. I mean, currently we're kind of talking about it in the context of farming, things like that too. But I think it could also, this maybe currently not happening as much, but it could happen. It could affect the pricing of power as well. So I think we're used to living our lives like the basics are manageable from a cost standpoint. And then if you want to take risk in life, build a business, do things, that's where you could incur costs or losses or big gains. Right. But now we're talking about if you just sit still, that will be so expensive. And that's the worry here.
So how would you see them? What would be a worst case scenario for you?
Okay, so worst case scenario is kind of twofold. Number one, it's the price of water goes up so much. Actually, let me back up. It's a kind of a slow ramp up. It would be the water market gets implemented at a broad scale within the Colorado River Basin. Once it gets implemented, I don't see it going away. Then that emanates out to other sources of water within the U.S. So then now,
like the Mississippi and
Mississippi, Great Lakes, wherever the case may be, that water is being pulled from to supply agriculture. Then it's going to be everything has a market, everything has a price. And of course, everything has a price now, but the instrument on top of it makes it so that money is the determinant of who gets it completely versus necessity. So that's a concern. So that emanation out of creating everything to have a water market, a price on top of it. The next layer on that is now it becomes investable at scale. And this could mean, foreign entities could come in and buy it. We've seen over the last 2 decades, if you recall the Dubai World Ports fiasco, like ports of Long Beach or up in New Jersey, wanting to be sold to companies, and that got blocked. But then there's a company in Australia, an investment bank called Macquarie Bank, and they actually buy infrastructure. And they've bought a tollway in Chicago in the early 2000s for billions of dollars, and then they now have the price or the access or the control of what the price of the toll should be. Interesting, it's a toll, not the worst thing in the world. Tolls, typically you just drive a little bit longer, go around it. You can't drive around the water.
Right. Yeah, even right now, if you look at the amount of access points China has acquired over the last 15 or 20 years, they're just continuing building out their infrastructure and shipping in ports, everything.
Right. And even then, you don't even have to necessarily buy these assets to control them. If they're investable, if they're tradable, you can buy futures contracts against them and move the price around. If you have unlimited money, which many governments, individuals, or institutions or companies do, now it becomes a strategy. There's a saying in the oil business that's called drilling for oil on Wall Street. And that's where typically companies buy each other to get their reserves.
Right.
So now it's investable to get water so easily rather than having to buy the land. You can buy the rights to it.
It's interesting. Let's walk through this. So we looked at this here. So have we talked about this yet?
We haven't. This is just kind of a bit more of a rundown of that actual index.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I think if you scroll down a bit, there's an interesting chart right here. Yeah, where the pink and the highlights it a little bit further down. There we go. So this is kind of currently some of the bodies of water where the Velis is primarily Southern California, but this just shows other little spots in the West where there's bodies of water that are resources. And it's, some of it does seem to encompass the Colorado River Basin, but this just gives you an idea of like, where are the hot spots of water resources for agricultural land, whatever the case may be. And if each one of these had their own contract, that's what we're talking about here. That's what I'm concerned about. Earlier you don't have to go to it now, but earlier you showed the Colorado River Basin. It kind of encapsulates half of this picture here.
Right. It's like right around, essentially right here.
Yeah, for sure.
Dips into Mexico, goes right through Arizona and Nevada.
Yep.
So when we're looking here, Orange County, we have Los Angeles, we go up here to San Francisco. Essentially, contracts could come in and reset a lot of, obviously, the cost for food, sure, but a lot of the housing costs too.
Right, because hey, this municipality, just the water levels or whatever the case may be are kind of low, so a lower supply means higher price. So therefore, it's going to affect real estate, like you were saying. Like, it's just your water bill in this neighborhood is just crazy expensive. It's like higher property taxes in certain states affect real estate prices sometimes.
Oh, definitely. Like if you're buying property in New Jersey, quarter of your income from that building or more could go straight to taxes. Whereas if you buy in, another tax-friendly state, Tennessee or even California has really good property taxes, it's going to greatly impact the viability of a purchase.
Right, and think about rent. If you were an Archstone, you're Blackstone, or an Equity Properties, and you have a lot of apartment complexes concentrated around one of these higher contract water sources, then your utility bill is going to go through the roof. And whether that you pass that on to the renter or not, it's going to drive rental prices as well. And we're already seeing a lot of upward pressure on that. That's causing a lot of problems for people who, maybe don't make enough money to live in some of these metropolises. So unfortunately, it seems like it's going to be another avenue to where the everyday person is going to have another challenge.
Right. Yeah. Even Larry Flink of BlackRock and Steven Schwarzman of Blackstone, they came out and said that coming soon is going to be very high expenses through utility bills.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, this is going to be another driver of that.
Interesting. So crude oil prices over the last 70 years.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting chart just to give the audience a view of like from, pre-1950, I think about 1940s. So basically from $20 a barrel, and oil was historically very, very low for so long because it was, from demand. The automotive industry wasn't as big. The industrial application wasn't as much. Then World War II, I think, started to change that. Then after that, the baby boom generation, the wanting to expand and drive, better technology started to move the price up. But we see the crazy price swings. Now in the 1970s, that first big rip right there, I think that was due to a lot of inflation, and there was the oil embargoes, issues with the Middle East back then that caused supply constraints. But that's one of the main things that pushed things up. And then after that, it was more demand based. But then we have these crashes and all these fluctuating gyrations. Yeah, it's fun to watch on a screen, I guess. But when you have to consider it going home and like, well, do I have enough money to drink water tonight or give my family, water for a week? Like those are thoughts I don't think here in the Western world we've actually had to have, and that's concerning.
Yeah, I was in Mexico 3 weeks ago, and I was on this little peninsula, and I was at a little restaurant. I was on the beach, and I asked the guy if I could use the Wi-Fi, and he had to turn on the generator, and they could only run the generator for like 5 minutes for me to do what I had to do. And I ended up paying him so he could run his generator for a few minutes for me to do the work. And they had to turn it off, and they were like almost practically out of gas.
Wow.
It's just interesting how like when we're in America, everything is pretty much handed to us. Like we're really blessed to be in America, and we never really faced any true trials, tribulations like what we could be stepping into with what this could unfold to be, which is extremely high cost across the board. And just food, water, utilities, everything can become so expensive that my big fear is that that we have a situation where it's just the 1% or the 0.05% that control the 99.5%, and then these people are losing out on all that.
Yeah, I mean, there's already a lot of that going on in business and, like our paradigms with education and, like, hey, follow this track, go to college, whatever the case may be, I think the world has come to a lot of awareness. But those things are, you can kind of navigate around. Like one of the key things you need is awareness. But the last bastion of, something we haven't had to worry about is water. And so now it's going to be, I think, controlled more by money, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this plays out or what happens. But to me, it seems like they have everything kind of lined up for it to unfold. Like if they have positions inside the Biden administration and they have the contracts kind of already moving along, it looks as though this could be a real big reality. And especially if they're talking about how they want to preserve resources, then this would be one way to do it, because they would disincentivize anyone from wasting water.
Yeah, and that's one of the big arguments. Typically water rights are attached to the land. So if you just happen to own the right plot of land where the water is, then you get kind of a higher allocation. But it's also like a use it or lose it. And so people sometimes, from the articles I've read, they'll pull from the groundwater. They'll pull it as much as they can just to use it. And so that has created waste. That is one of the accusations levied against the current sort of way things are set up. And so a water market creates something that's more economical, more capitalistic in a sense, where you move it to where it's truly needed rather than just pulling out for the sake of pulling out because you don't want to waste. And so like that initial intention is good, but now it's about, again, money. And that's going to make people who don't have it, I think, the losers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think what we're doing is we're essentially stepping into like a technocratic world where people have a couple years to either build out like a mode of safety and security around future business models, almost reverse engineering the future right now and planning for higher expenses, higher costs. Because it definitely will happen. We're seeing, Argentina lost, I think, 58% on their currency just this year. Turkey, 42%. We're seeing inflation across the board. It's looking pretty concerning out there. And what seems very troubling, it seems like as though we could be stepping into another big problem. I'm reading a lot of headlines now where it looks like we could have a repeat of what we've seen in the past, where we might have more stimulus and more stimulus and more stimulus, making things even harder.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big concern. So I think, something that people can do is be on the lookout for, try to understand where your local utility gets their water. And just kind of understanding the supply chain of your water is a great first step. And then you can ascertain, as you pay attention, if you go on the NASDAQ's websites or the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, a lot of commodities are traded there as well. Understanding, if these financial instruments are being put onto the body of water that you're getting your water from, and then you can help better prepare yourself and your family and your neighbors for what may be coming.
Yeah. So I'm running Aaron's YouTube channel. Aaron's a really smart guy, and I'm really looking forward to helping put out a lot of really good, partnering with him and helping him put out a lot of really good content on his channel. I'm going to leave the link to his channel inside of the description below this video. Go check him out, subscribe. We're going to be posting 3 times a week on that channel. If you are interested in getting started on YouTube, I'm having a Black Friday sale right now up to 50% off. Click the link in the description. YouTube, I believe, is one of the biggest opportunities right now as we step into a world where online advertising is only going to increase, and building out a brand now online to where you can, build out something to where you can either help people on a large scale through mentorship or coaching or an online platform, online business. This is the moment to do it. In 2 years or 3 years, I think this market's going to get so saturated. So if you want to get started on YouTube, take the link down below. Same with real estate. If you want to invest in cash flowing multifamily real estate, 50% off as well as one-on-one mentorship via Zoom calls. Aaron, thanks so much, and talk to you in a bit.
Thanks a lot, John.